Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha Singh, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Siraj Sira, who recently returned from Gaza as part of the Global Medical Foundation Australia. Thank you, Siraj, for joining me.
Thank you, Saleha, for having me on your show.
Pleasure. Before we start and talk about your trip to Gaza, would you like to tell us something about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a general practitioner currently working in the Western Sydney area. So I grew up and studied medicine in Bangalore. I moved here in '98. Went through the AMC pathway, got through the exams. As an overseas doctor, I had to work in the rural area for X number of years. So did my time in the rural area, which I absolutely loved. And 2010, I completed my fellowship in general practice, and I've been working in the current practice since then.
Why medicine, Siraj?
A few reasons. Um, I grew up in an era where we had to listen to our parents, and they said, "You're going to do this," and it was either medicine or engineering.
Of
Maths and I
course.
never maths and I never got along, so I had no option. And I did come from a family of doctors. My dad retired as a dean of the veterinary college in Bangalore. My grandfather was a doctor. My uncle and aunt were doctors. So it was carrying on the family trade, I suppose.
So, tell us something about your organization, your not-for-profit organization.
So, Global Medical Foundation Australia, GMF Australia, was set up about 10 years back by a group of friends. We uh, purely for the intention of helping the underprivileged people both here in Australia and overseas. We wanted to be different. So, when we wanted to donate to somebody, donate to a cause, we found that a large chunk would go, or a portion would go for admin costs and to run. And we didn't want that. If somebody gave us $100 or $1, we wanted to spend that on the poor or spend where it had to be spent. So we co-founded GMF Australia to help people, and it was over a dining table. So we said, okay, let's do this. And we've since inception, we've been to Africa, we've been to India, Nepal, Philippines, Bangladesh at the Rohingya camps a couple of times. We've been to the Zaatari camp in Jordan, and recently Gaza. So we do medical camps, medical and surgical camps. We've done camps in these places. We also facilitate cataract surgeries in Africa and also in India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. We support the homeless communities here locally. We do regular blood donation drives. Um, and we help the refugees who come in. So when the Afghanistan thing happened, with a lot of Afghani refugees who came in, so we helped the kids with the stationaries and school, like what we were talking about. There were quite a few doctors who came in, so we helped them with books and guided them in regards to how to get into the system here. Now with the recent refugees from Gaza who have come in, we're trying to provide them with medical care, and do the best we can to assimilate them or help them. Get Help them with whatever they need to settle in.
Okay, thank you. Um, you were recently in Gaza. Why did you want to go to Gaza? And what did you see?
So Gaza has been one of those places where you've heard for years about the oppression which the people of Gaza are facing. So that has always been, for me personally, one of those places where I'd always wanted to go and help out. Even before the war started, we had contacts on the ground where we were trying to set up, helping the elderly people with projects like people looking after people with diabetic foot or diabetes or chronic disease, basically. So we had our contacts at the Shifa Hospital up in the north. So we had a good working relationship with this group. And then when the war started on October 7th, we were in constant touch with the guys on the ground, and some of the pictures and videos which I was being sent was just unimaginable. The trauma we were seeing, kids coming up with, blown up limbs and injuries. It was, we just couldn't sit and do nothing about it. We had the means, we had the contacts, and it was just a matter of, guys, there's a crisis here, we need to go. So we got the ball rolling, and one thing led to another. And once you make your intention, the doors kept opening up for us. And one thing led on to another, and we had to go in with under the umbrella of the UN. So we approached the organizations, and yeah, we were within a matter of over a month, we got our permits, and we were in Gaza.
When did you go?
So we, GMF, we partnered with another organization called Med Global, which is a humanitarian organization based in the US, and they had a clinic, or they had a team in Gaza. So we, April 15th to the 29th was a mission which we went in. So three of us from Australia paired up with four from the US from the Med Global team, and then we went. We arrived in Cairo. We met up with the rest of the team. So we were, from our side, we had a general surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon, and myself. And from the US, we had a general practitioner, we had a plastic surgeon, we had a nurse, and three security personnel with us to look after our safety and make sure that we comply by the rules of the UN.
So what did you see there, Siraj?
So we met up, and we met up. I mean, look, I think words, I guess, cannot do justice to the humanitarian crisis and the suffering which the people of Gaza are facing at the moment. We kind of knew that. We kind of knew that we were going into this uncharted territory. We had never been into a war zone, with active war zone before, so it was new for all of us. So we entered through the Rafah crossing, which I guess doesn't exist anymore, which was burned down recently. So we had our supplies with us. We took our supplies with us. We had to take our own food, own water for 2 weeks. We had to take our own medical supplies. So between our team, we had close to about 45 odd bags with us. So we went through the Sinai from Cairo to the Rafah crossing, which took almost about 5 odd hours. At the Egyptian part of the Rafah crossing, we spent almost about 7 hours trying to get our permits and trying to get our luggage sorted.
And there was no problem at the crossing. They let you cross
Thankfully,
because
there was no problems. It took a long time. We did cross, and we had all our supplies pass through. We didn't. There was nothing which we couldn't take. It was the first thing which we heard when we got into Rafah, which is the Palestinian side, was the sound of drones. There was a constant buzz, constant hum on top of your head. It's pretty loud. Gunshots at a distance, bombs going off. We were briefed by the UN that we couldn't travel in the night, and by the time we got our supplies in and we started traveling, it was quite dark. So we were in a van, UN marked van. We were transported from the Rafah crossing to the safe house. And these safe houses are where all the NGOs stayed in Rafah, which is in a deconflicted area. Deconflicted area are areas where you cannot be attacked, but which was
that doesn't stop
maybe
though.
doesn't stop, and that it
UN
was
can't.
not
Yep.
they were not really a thing. So the MSF building did apparently get hit before. This was before we entered.
Yeah.
We got told that. So we crossed through some eerie streets, pretty dark, and the only lighting was from an occasional shop, or people using their mobile phones. We passed through lots and lots of tents. In the night, we couldn't comprehend the the uh, extent of the tents. So we reached the safe house. We unpacked. We were given our postings for the first week. So the security personnel had to coordinate with two Israeli organizations called COGAD and the CLA, and every movement of ours had to be coordinated. What time we leave, what roads we take, everything had to be coordinated, and we could
Were
not.
you being watched?
You would get a feel that you were watched, but we actually did not come across any IDF personnel while we were there. But there was this constant buzzing of drones and
Yeah.
through the night. So we unpacked. We packed for the week. We were subdivided into three smaller groups. Being the GP, I was asked to work at a PHC, or the Primary Health Center, which was like a small makeshift medical center. So the first week there was a place called Tal al Sultan, which is again has come under intense bombing in the last few weeks when Rafah was attacked. So I used to work in, so to understand the complexity of the situation. I mean, the morning when we were passing through the safe house to the primary health center in Tal al Sultan, it was about 20 minutes to half an hour drive. This place had about 1.5 million people. So everybody from the north was displaced
In one
to
place?
in one place. Rafah is a very small place, and it had about 1.5 million internally displaced people. There were tents everywhere. There was overcrowding in the tents. Each tent had about 10 or 15 people, and they were makeshift toilets. It was a tin shed, and one toilet for men, one toilet for women, which was clearly marked. And at that stage, when we were there between end of April, every 100 to 150 people were using one toilet. There was no water.
150 people using one toilet.
One toilet. There was no electricity. There was no water. There was no sanitation. There was no food to eat. There was hardly any food to eat. And so what I saw in the primary health center was a consequence of how people were living. So we saw a fair amount of respiratory infections. You can imagine, one person gets an infection, there's closely packed tents, and the viruses can spread like wildfire. I saw a lot of diarrheal disease. And look, with the diarrhea, just imagine having diarrhea and you're sharing a toilet with about 150 people. There's no water, there's no soap. Um, there was garbage, and the stench of garbage you couldn't miss
Overpowering.
it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I thought, living in India, going through growing up in India, the poverty which we saw, I thought I would, be. The words cannot describe what I saw. There was stagnant water everywhere, and there was sewage spilling onto the roads. And you'd see all these kids walking bare feet, picking up garbage from the sewage, which to, help them with whatever they could through the day. And there were
You mean
skin
they're
diseases.
eating food from the garbage?
There was whatever food was available. They were not thankfully eating food in the garbage, but they would pick up a garbage bag. They would pick up a plastic bag which could help them,
Oh,
you know, fill their bags up with something. There would be water tanks which would come and supply water, and children as old as 4, 5 would be standing, waiting with the small hands carrying the containers, waiting for their turn to fill up the water. Um, Piece of bread, they would be happy. There would be stalls that we saw people selling canned food on the streets. And I guess we always wondered where this came from. We were told that there could be a black market here, and a can of oil was about $100. A cigarette was costing $20. One cigarette, not a pack of cigarette, one cigarette. And a bag of sugar would cost about $100. And that kind of money people did not have, and people who did have could afford it. So we saw a lot of hepatitis A, and as you know, hepatitis A is a virus. You have contaminated water, you contaminated food, it can get transmitted. There's no treatment for that. You rest, you eat clean, you drink clean drinking water. But the people of Rafah did not have rest. They were constantly bombed. There was drones. They couldn't sleep. There was no clean water to drink. There was no nutritious food. They were constantly on the move. And we saw, unfortunately, deaths happening from hepatitis A, which is very hard to, in this day and age, hard to imagine. There was no sanitation. So when people would come in with diarrheal disease, I would feel stupid telling them to wash your hands, drink water. It was managing these was extremely challenging. And what really broke my heart was right next to the primary health center was a nutritional center. So I used to spend my mornings working in the nutritional center, and this place saw children with malnutrition. Now, I have read in textbooks, I've seen pictures, but when you actually see these kids, skin and bones, you know, having secondary infections. Now, when we're passing through the Rafah crossing, into the Rafah crossing, we saw hundreds and hundreds of aid trucks standing with food and medical supplies and water.
And not
500
being able
meters,
to get in.
not being able to get in. 500 meters across, their kids starving to death. There was no food to eat, and women, pregnant women, were having one canned meal a day, if that.
Oh my God.
Here you get the best of treatment, your vitamins, your this, your that, and there was no food for these women to eat, and so they themselves were malnourished. They were giving birth to low birth weight babies, and these kids did not have the reserve to fight off infections. And one, women didn't want to breastfeed. There was no privacy for these women to breastfeed. They were right next to the center where I was working. There was a school, and the classrooms were full of people. It was a makeshift school, and they were, and there was no privacy for women to breastfeed, and women could not produce milk because of the malnutrition which they're having. And when people would come in, when fathers would come in asking for, my son has not had formula, my wife does not have breast milk supply, can you give us a formula, or can you give us some milk? That's gut wrenching. And yeah, just imagine putting our children to sleep hungry one night, and these guys have been doing it for months and months, and there's no end in sight. And to see how people are deliberately being starved, deliberately being, pushed to such a limit, it's really heartbreaking in this day and age. And you know, as human beings, we've just turned our backs on them. And the extent of suffering these guys are going through is just not, it's just unimaginable.
Tell us
Um,
about the state of the hospitals, Shiraz.
so my first week was basically trying to help these people to the best we could. We took our supplies with us. We had some formulas which we gave out. My second week was, there was constant bombing happening in a place where we were staying. It's a place called Dar al Bala in the center of Gaza. So I was asked to move in and help out in the emergency department. So this is the place called Al-Aqsa Hospital, where most of our team
Yeah.
was from the word go. So I worked in the emergency department, and this place was an absolute chaos. There was no there was It was a very small front desk. So there were two zones. A place called green zone, where we would see, if you would compared to what we see here in the emergency departments, category 3, 4s, and 5s, which is what a CMO or a general practitioner can see, which is small traumas, people with coughs and colds, people with diabetes, chronic disease. And there was a red zone where people would be coming in with bomb injuries, bomb blast injuries, gunshot injuries, shrapnel injuries, drone attacks. And at that stage, there were pretty intensive bombing happening where we were. The whole hospital would shake. You would feel your ears pop. You could feel the force, and you could feel the being sucked out of the room. The intensity with which the bombs would go off. So as in working the front desk, I was supported by a lot of medical students, which these young, dedicated doctors have had the universities bombed. So
And these are local students and doctors.
they are local doctors, the local young doctors in third, fourth, fifth year of medicine, dentistry. So I have in the primary health center, I had a young dentist she was almost there. This was meant to be her graduation year, and now they don't know what they're going to do anymore. So in the hospital, we were supported by these young doctors. They would work as translators for us. They would take a history. They would they didn't have the clinical experience to examine patients, so we would teach them how to examine patients, but they were doing an amazing job trying to talk to people, trying to comfort them, trying to console them, counsel them, and they would just be there from morning. Some of them would walk for an hour amidst all the bombing which is happening. They've lost everything. They've been deaths in the families. They don't have a place to stay. They're staying in tents. They don't have food to eat. But they would come. They would come and volunteer from morning until evening, until we couldn't walk in the dark, we couldn't travel in the dark. So they would go back in the evenings to their respective tents, but they would help us with thing, and um, they would help us translate. So what we learned was there was no medicine for chronic disease. There was hardly any diabetes medications. There was no hypertensive medications. So managing them was a challenge, and there was no beds in the hospital. So the people would come in and just dump them on the floor, and we were putting cannulas on the floor. There was blood everywhere. There's saline everywhere. People walking over them. We What we also learned was most of the dialysis or chronic kidney patients were in the north, and so these people. So Al-Aqsa Hospital was a maternity hospital, and it was one of the only few surviving hospitals, and they were taking everything, whatever they could to manage these patients. So they were running on very less fuel. So fuel to these hospitals is supplied by the UN, and UN buys fuel from Israel at a very high price. And so the dialysis, instead of happening for
Yeah.
7, 8 hours, was happening for about 2 or 3 hours. And what people who were dodging the bombs were dying a very painful, slow death. Um, and the trauma we saw, my colleagues saw, and people who would worry us are people who so how they would present is um, relatives dragging their limbs and bringing them into the hospital, blood soaked with blood everywhere. We saw kids coming with gunshots to the head, kids coming with gunshots to the eye, fractures. We had a 7-year-old child called Fatima who came in. She was playing. In the area where she was playing and got hit by a bomb. She lost her left arm, and the parents brought her left arm wrapped up in a towel, um, asking us to fix her arm. We saw a 6-year-old Hamza who was playing next to his tent. It's a dirt patch, playing soccer with his brother, and they got hit by a bomb. And he came in with shrapnel injuries to the head, shrapnel injuries to his stomach, abdomen, chest. So our surgical colleagues had to take him, control the bleeding, and the facilities in the hospital were very. It was challenging to manage, and sadly, this child died 3 4 days later, and his brother, few days later, he passed away. So in a matter of few days, this family had lost two of their children. Some of the injuries, shrapnel injuries. I mean, I never knew what a quadcopter was before I entered Gaza, and
What is it?
the as a quadcopter is like a drone which they've got the small thing called shrapnels which explode and cause devastating injuries to people who are in close vicinity. And most people who suffer are children because of their surface area. And you only need a small shrapnel to penetrate the heart and penetrate the chest and cause trauma. And the magnitude of the trauma that causes is just crazy. So we had a young child who came in with, he had a shrapnel injury to his abdomen, which is with his intestines hanging out. And the exit wound of the shrapnel was on his right buttock, and he had a piece of intestines hanging out from his buttock coming out. Um, you don't come when you see this, you don't comprehend the amount extent of injuries happening. And what we see here on TV, or what we see on the social media, is probably just 2 3% of what we actually
It's the
experienced.
tip of the iceberg.
It's a tip of the iceberg. And the extent of injuries which we saw was, the amount of trauma which we saw was just beyond comprehension. And we passed through a place called Khan Yunus, and
Yeah.
this was between Rafah and this Dar al Bala, where we had to cross this place to go into Al Aqsa Hospital. The Khan Yunus was annihilated. There was not a single building standing there. And when the Rafah invasion happened, all these people have been asked to move into Khan Yunus. And how now, when I'm still in contact with the doctors there, the medical students there, and the suffering which they're going through Khan Yunus, they're saying, at least when we were there were 150 people using a toilet. Here, there are about 1,000 people using a toilet. People don't have clean drinking water, they're drinking seawater. So one of my translators sent me a student sent me a video recently where they were collecting seawaters and seawater to drink, and they were passing the seawater through a bed of stones and cloth
Oh
to
my God.
sieve salt out of water. Now there's hardly any food, and now the parents are eating every second or third day so that at least the children can have a slice of bread or piece of bread. um, how long is this going to last for? What are we doing as an international community, watching the suffering of these people and being in this, you working there for 2 weeks, staying there for 2 weeks, living with people for 2 weeks. They gave us a small room in the hospital. We six of us shared. We were lying. We had our sleeping bags and we stayed there. We survive on tuna cans and muesli bars and whatever food we took. You didn't have the heart to eat all of those, your chocolates, your biscuits. So
Of course.
we kept giving it to the kids who were there and thing. And Palestinians are such lovely people. I would walk. There was from my room where I was staying to the emergency department. There was a small alley, and there'd be this old man sitting there with a piece of bread eating, and he would say, "Come and join me." He had one slice of bread for God's sake, and he would say, "Come and share my meal with me." On my last day, these medical students, they have lost everything. They have a few shekels in their pockets, and they said, "We want to treat you to a falafel roll for everything you've done for us." And what did I do for them? Nothing. I was there. I was there, as a doctor helping them. I taught them a few examination techniques and things. And they bought me a falafel roll. um, they're such lovely people, and for them to experience such inhumane behavior, such cruelty, is just hard to imagine. While you were there, you're on the adrenaline rush. You keep going. You're trying to save people. You're trying to do things. When you come back, it hits you. It hits you, and sense. You think to yourself, "Well, I've come back now. How do I help these people?" And you feel so helpless. You want to help them, but you just can't help them. There's no way of helping them because of all the blockade which is there. There's no food aid you want to go in. We took in almost about 1,400 boxes of food aid. Only about 120, 130 cotton. We have almost about 1,200 boxes of food lying in a warehouse in Cairo, and you just can't go in, knowing that it's only a 500 meters between the Rafah crossing in Egypt to thing, and so many people suffering. It's unimaginable, and that feeling of helplessness is more worse than when you are actually there. So I just hope, we hope and pray that this war ends soon and people return back to their lives and start rebuilding. And as in, they they're very resilient people. They have not lost hope, and they just want to, be left alone, be want to live in dignity, want to live in peace, want to have, like all of us, basics, food, water, medical aid, um,
Shelter.
shelter. Exactly, shelter. How difficult is it? Yeah, unfortunately wars happen, war. That's sad, but the extent to which the civilians are suffering is just
Children
unimaginable.
being killed, maimed,
Children being
dying.
killed. And when we passed through Khan Yunis, we were told that there are about at least 10,000 people unaccounted for under the rubble of these buildings. And just to comprehend children under the rubble, what sort of, you know, not accounted for. We saw so many orphans. There used to be funeral prayers every day. For me, I mean, I had the opportunity to pray those funeral prayers. And I should tell you the story of this 10-year-old boy called Zico. So Zico used to live with his family in Rafah. And when the war started, he he had this urge to say, no, I'm not going to sit at home and fly a kite or play soccer. I'm going to help people. So this kid at 10, he would come and work or volunteer at Raksa Hospital. He would come push gurneys, wipe off blood off the trolleys. He would go with ambulance cars and pick up bodies from the bomb blast sites.
Oh my
So
God.
bomb blast site, everybody knew him, and he was 10. So one day, my colleague and I were standing outside. It was a quietest start to the day, surprisingly. So Zico comes in and says, "Come, I'll take you to a place." So he takes us to a morgue, and he opens up the body bags and shows these are the martyrs from last night. He's opening up. He's opening up the cold box and say, "Well, there's nobody in the cold box." I have a 11-year-old, and when I was taking pictures, I still, when I've got my pictures and videos on my phone, I don't let her see my phone. But this kid is living it. Just imagine the amount of psychological
Yes,
trauma this kid is going to
yes,
have when he's growing up. And he would push trolleys, he would do things till the middle of the night. And I would ask him, Zico, what are you doing, Zico? It's bedtime. He said, no, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. He runs around. He runs around, just sleeps in a ward somewhere, he eats whatever. And he used to make this weird ambulance sound. He would mimic an ambulance sound. So when he was ordering, he'd run around the corridors of the hospital, making this ambulance sounds. A few weeks back, he called me through one of the medical students, and he says, "Siraj, the war is still happening. I'm getting bored here. Can you come and get me out of here?" And you know that that is heartbreaking. When and the messages you're getting, you are our hope. Spread our word. Spread the word. Now, people, cleaners of the hospital. I mean, when you're there, you are a family. So I used to eat with the cleaners, sit with the cleaners and thing. So I was getting messages from this guy who was captured by the IDF. He was handcuffed. He was blindfolded for 50 days, beaten. So and then released. And he was telling me his story. Then he messaged me, and he's like, "Oh, pray for us. My children are starving. We haven't eaten for 3 days." And he sends me pictures of his children, saying, "Ah, Dr. Siraj, this." Seeing the amount of suffering you see these people are experiencing, and children still having a smile on their face, and that shows the resilience. And people like Zico, these medical students,
yeah,
they are the hope of Gaza. They are the future of Gaza. And what I feel, what I think personally is, we can't turn our backs on them. As a humanitarian, for a minute, why don't we just this is how I think. Just shed away our political thing. We are not, there's no politics involved. There's no religion involved here. Just as a human being to another human being, from one pregnant woman who is giving birth to another pregnant woman. I mean, pregnant women are having cesarean sections without an anesthesia. There's Panadol, there's Nurofen, there's no second drug. We were amputating left, right, and center. The ward was full of amputees. Some had lost 3 limbs, some had lost 2 limbs. You walk and people just lying with a torso there. Just imagine going through a tent and just your activities of daily living, just the toileting, just the showering. He's got no limbs, he's got no prosthesis, he's got one hand. What sort of a future is this young guy going to have? You know, um, and and the amount of and you can't comprehend. You just I mean, we just there's numbers. There's so many have dead, so many have died so far. But how many people are going to die of complications of injuries, complications of surgeries? Complications of what's happening, lack of aid. I certified deaths from an 8-month-old who had died from a heat stroke in a tent. There was no food, there was no water, and you go outside, you burn in the tent. It's like sitting in a car on a hot day here in Sydney, right? And these guys have nowhere to hide. Um, I would see elderly women who had absolutely no reserve. They just be lying on the floor there, having no having no energy to even talk. And just imagine if that was my mother lying on the floor or my grandmother lying on the floor. You just can't when you're there, your mind goes to, what if it was my child, what if it was my thing. So what I was getting at is, just imagine, as a woman to another woman, as a father to another father, we just have to think from an humanitarian perspective. There's so much suffering there. What can we do to help things, make things better, help these people? And that's what we are hoping to achieve in the coming months. Things stop, hopefully go back and help with, helping them with their medical aid and humanitarian aid.
How can we help?
Being a voice, I suppose, being a voice, showing people what is actually happening there. um, Not, talking about them, not forgetting them, praying for them, and just being their voice. I mean, saying, I guess, showing what we saw, and spreading the word, speaking to people. I'm actually looking after a few refugees from Gaza. They've come on tourist visas, and they can't work, and they
So
have
how do they survive?
on handouts on charity organizations. So we have set up a group of GPs and specialists who have volunteered, who will volunteer their time, who have volunteered their time. We've got a pharmacy set up where these people can access free medicines. We don't charge them for providing care. Um, some of the specialists are seeing them without charging them. We're trying to get their children some sort of English education so that they can go to school. We are speaking to schools to see if they can admit them and give them schooling. Um, Doing our best. So I guess, being there, looking into local communities and seeing if anybody is doing supporting them. There are a few organizations in Melbourne. There are a few organizations here in Sydney who are supporting them, helping them with food, helping them with clothes. We all know what the cost of living in Sydney is, even if you have, or for that matter, Australia is. And just imagine having an extra 4 or 5 people who are living in your house, living in a relative's house. It's an added burden on them, and they have opened their hearts and opened their houses for them. And I guess it's coordinating and keeping your eyes and ears open for where these families are, or where the refugees are, no matter where they are from, trying to help to the best we can.
Will you email me the, how we can help, how we can donate, um, how we can help in settling the refugees who are here? Because sending food, I mean, the only way I can think of helping is by donating, and hopefully it'll reach. And I'm talking monetary donations because obviously we can't do any other donation, and
Yeah.
hoping that it reaches the children, the families, and the borders open, and there's some kind of ceasefire. um, so many hopes, so many, I think, I mean, I am not in your place. I haven't relived or lived what you have, but just listening to you, 10-year-old running around showing you bodies in a body bag and in the morgue, and and a parent coming with an amputated arm. I cannot believe it. It's beyond mind boggling. Yes, you read about it every day, but it's if you email me all the details, Melbourne contacts and your Sydney contacts, I will share.
Thank you, Saleh. Thank you. I will.
And hopefully, like you, I'm sure most of us pray that it will end soon, but somehow politics override everything else.
That's our hope. We hope that humanity prevails, and there's some common sense prevails, and we stop. We there's a ceasefire. There's a permanent ceasefire, and people sort the differences out, and for live in peace, live peacefully. And I guess that's where, that's all we could do at this stage: pray and hope that humanity prevails.
Thank you, Siraj. I'll wait for your email.
Thank you, Saleh. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining.